Welcome back, everyone, to the PNL IRL podcast. This is Luke, and with me, as always, my co-host, Pat.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, welcome back, and man, what a week it has been. We're recording this a little late, both of us very busy this past week. Pat, how was your week going? I know super busy. Any updates you want to share with us here?
Nothing crazy to share, just an unbelievably busy week. We're still adjusting to Kelly's new school schedule, so I basically have 2 days a week where we don't see each other, and we're kind of on our own at certain times with the kiddo, and then we have to try to make up for it sometimes. So that's what we did a lot yesterday.
There you go. Yeah, I definitely understand that, and this has kind of been my first week back at work too, so I was putting in 10, 11-hour days, getting everything ready for my school year, which has been a lot of fun, but a ton of work with some of the new responsibilities I've taken on. So we both agreed to just move this back, give us a day to decompress, and look at our topics this week. So let's talk about what's been new lately, and some sad news coming out of the political world just straight up off the bat here. Senator John McCain passing away from brain cancer, age 81. Sad, we did kind of know this was on the horizon. In recent days, he had stopped treatment for that brain cancer, so I feel like a lot of people knew this was here. But he has passed away today, August 25th. John McCain, senator from Arizona, famous for spending 5.5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. Also a couple unsuccessful presidential runs, and also very infamous for killing the GOP attempt to overturn the Affordable Care Act. Regardless of politics, as I said before, we don't talk politics on this, but the death of a U.S. senator is a significant event, and it could have an impact going forward in the realm of politics, but just kind of a sad passing in general, the loss of a leader of this great country.
In other news, we always have a little bit of video game news. We
Yep.
know it well. So we have another new Destiny Forsaken trailer,
Yes.
and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you do. It is our standard, as we all know him well, Cade,
Yes.
doing his Cade thing, and it kind of shows how we got to the point of earlier trailers. So very interesting. Don't want to give too much away, but
Yeah,
man, they are going all out on some story things this time.
Yeah, no spoilers. That's definitely a good thing for Destiny, I think, getting back into the story, but definitely setting us up for hopefully something exciting. We also have in video game news the Black Ops 4 beta. I did not play it. I'm not a big Call of Duty fan, but you did, Pat. What were your initial impressions of it?
I played it, only because I'm a Comcast customer, so it was free. And fortunately, it felt like it gets back to some of the things that made earlier Call of Duties a lot better than the more recent ones have been. So like what Modern Warfare 2 or Black Ops 2, some of the games that got a lot of playtime, this is getting back to those a little bit, less on the aesthetics of having suits and shields and being able to jump and partially fly, and it just gets back to run and gun. So it was good.
Cool. Maybe I'll have to check it out. I definitely didn't, but I've seen a few streamers. I've watched a few YouTube clips of it. It looked okay. It just, maybe not for me, but you never know. Maybe Black Ops 4 will be the one that gets me back into Call of Duty after being out of it for a few iterations of that game. In random news, we have a Twitch Pokemon Marathon coming up. Relive the nostalgia starting August 27th. So on Monday, Twitch will be streaming a variety of the original animes as well as the movies, Pokemon movies. So if you're like me, you remember as a kid going to the movie theater and getting those special Mewtwo cards and stuff, you can relive your nostalgia starting on Monday with Twitch. Kind of just a fun little thing there if you're a Pokemon fan like I used to be. Still kind of am. I'm a nerd. It's what I do. So, and then we also have a new thing released in the sports world. So we're gonna transition to sports now. In the sports world, we have SB Nation. SB Nation is a YouTube channel as well as a group. And what they did was they released an investigation into college athletics. It is a very interesting look into the world of college athletics and the fact that college athletes are not paid for their being on the field. And they look specifically at college football in the SEC with the case of Laramie Tunsil and Leo Lewis. The series is called Foul Play. There is some, difficult language, and there's some dealing with some sensitive topics like drugs and alcohol. But it is very interesting to see how these things play out. The drama, to me, was almost very real, talking about how some of these guys would pass along money, and eventually some of them got caught and getting caught in the lie. They specifically, with the Leo Lewis case, look at Ole Miss and Mississippi State. It's a very, very interesting series. Definitely something to look into if you're interested in college athletics and that kind of realm. And then we also have, many of us fantasy drafting. I just drafted my first fantasy team tonight. Hopefully I'm going to do well with fantasy football, but we'll look into a fantasy football podcast maybe in the next couple weeks as well. But definitely getting your picks in and talking about that. Turning to the NFL, we have Dez Bryant back in the news. He has turned down some money from the Cleveland Browns. He reportedly turns down about $5 million, according to CBS Sports, because he is waiting for a better deal. He also, just to not single out the Browns with Dez Bryant, he turned down a 3-year deal with the Ravens. And the Ravens went ahead and signed Michael Crabtree instead. So Dez turning down the money. Maybe Dez thinking he is maybe a little bit better than what he is in his age. What do you think about that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, confidence and overconfidence in this day and age, and especially in the NFL, can really hurt you down the road. So at this point, he's starting to get, if he didn't already have it, a strong reputation for being overconfident. He's going to start getting more and more questions about his morality, maybe isn't the right word, but his principles, his beliefs, and people are realizing he's out for himself, not for any one team. If cash is king, sometimes people want a role player, or maybe they just need some veteran leadership on a team. And so you don't pay $20 million to someone to just provide guidance to the younger guys. So right. I don't know what his ultimate plan is, but right now he's unemployed and not getting paid at all. So if I was him, I'd have taken $5 million over zero.
Yes. And tying into this, just tying into football in general, Indiana University is in football news. For bad reasons, the Hoosiers have suspended their leading rusher from the previous year indefinitely. I saw this across my CBS Sports headlines, and I was like, oh, Indiana football. And then, oh, it's really bad. It's shocking with Indiana football, as we know. But Morgan Ellison, leading the team rushing as a freshman, he has been, quote, suspended indefinitely, according to CBS Sports. And Indiana did not specify the reasons for Ellison's suspension. There will be at least one game missed, guaranteed. We'll have to see how that plays out for our dearly beloved Hoosiers. And speaking of people who will probably not be playing in their next game, there was maybe the best ejection from a ball game ever. Pat, did you see this one?
I didn't. You're going to have to explain it to me while I watch it.
So I'm going to post a link in the comments, and this was a great ejection. So we're a minor league baseball team. I believe the team's name was like the Hot Dogs or something. So just minor league baseball team.
Now that you're saying it's minor league, I think I know which one it is.
Yeah, minor league team names in general are just, that's a topic we could talk about, and the best minor league team names. But it's a Chicago minor league team, and their manager, Butch Hobson, he gets ejected, and after having words with the umpire, as you would, having your final say, Mr. Hobson decides that it's a good time to step into the plate and take an imaginary swing with the bat. And I'll tell you what, that imaginary swing was a dinger, in the words of Big Al. He sent that imaginary pitch out of the park and then proceeded to run around all of the bases. Even got a nice little hand slap from his third base coach and a standing ovation from his dugout after getting in the final words to the umpire. So fun, silly, obviously, it is what it is. You want to emphasize sportsmanship, but the man, you don't get much more gutsy than that, right? Up for maybe like going and picking up the base and stealing it. but it's a
I mean,
doozy.
my favorite ejection here recently was that minor league player who brought the trash can out and set it right behind home plate where the umpire is supposed to stand. That one to me is the top. Nothing's gonna beat it.
This is a good one though. I'll post a link in the comments again. A good one, and obviously umpires have a very difficult job. We respect the work they do, but it's always fun to see a little bit of silly ejections in the MLB and minor league baseball. It's always one of my favorite things. So let's transition into the topic of the week, which is work culture in America. Pat, we're talking about what work is like for a variety of different people and how we handle work in this country. What are your thoughts on that, or where do we want to begin with that?
I think I want to start with the overarching theme and idea that in this country specifically, we are, it is standard practice to have more work to do than you have time or people to do it. That's just normal. United States companies tend to run lean. They don't like to have any extra people or time because at the end of the day, that's kind of a waste of money. So that is a big driver in everything that we see, at least on a corporate side. And Luke, I'm sure there's a lot of similarities to the teaching world, but I don't know exactly where some of our lines may cross, where they meet, or where they're parallel.
Sure, yeah, I think it can be very difficult, and just let me speak from my personal experience. I am, at least my personal views on work. My personal view on work is that I'm the one who truly believes that I can get the job done, regardless of what that job is. I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to put in whatever time is needed. I'm going to put in the overtime if it's needed, and I'm not necessarily going to ask for pay for that overtime. That is just, for me, my inherent mindset. I understand and I get where at some point you need to be paid and compensated for overtime. For me, again, it's different, the work that I'm in, but if I'm staying a couple extra hours, that's okay. To me, those extra couple hours will make the rest of my job better or will help improve that. And in my line of work, obviously teaching, it's not just me. I have students that rely on me. I have administrators who rely on me. And my mindset, and I think all workers' mindsets is to give the very best product possible, but to sometimes sacrifice a little bit of myself. And that can be a negative thing. It definitely can be a negative thing. Being the last one out the door can be taxing on you. And that's just common sense, common knowledge, right? That just brings more stress into your life. And then how do you handle that stress? How do you manage all those things? So for me, it's a difficult balance, at least in my realm of what I do.
Yeah, I think that's fair and consistent. I think it also, just leads us to a good point where doing some of those extra things, spending the extra time, can also lead to perceptions of you that you may not want.
True.
So some people may start viewing a person like that as a brown noser or the suck up or whatever you want to call it. There's a political side that we've talked about on this podcast.
Sure.
Of working and interacting with your coworkers that can be just as taxing as the fact that you're tired and just not at home.
Definitely.
But one of the things I did to prepare for this podcast, first of all, we talk about this topic all the time at work. So we have problems in my company with turnover, whether it be at the hourly fulfillment center associate level or the exempt, management, supervisor, manager, director level. So we have people who are coming in, spending a year or two, if that, and then they're leaving. And so we talk about this all the time because we need to get people to come. We need to get them to stay. And we don't have blank checks to pay you whatever you want that makes you happy and never leave.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, cash is not what keeps you somewhere forever anyway. So if I am upset and I get a $10,000 raise, that doesn't mean 6 months from now I'm going to be just as happy as when I got that raise. I may still be like, this place still sucks, I'm out. So at some point, you need to truly understand and identify what is the culture of your workplace. How does your company handle everything about business. How does it handle urgency? How does it handle overtime? How does it handle work-life balance and encouraging it? Do you offer paternity leave? Maternity leave there's laws around that.
Right.
There are minimums, maximums, how much you have to pay, etc. But paternity leave is a new, kind of more recent trend that you can choose to offer. So there's lots of ways to get to a point where your company and your culture fits the industry, fits the business model, fits the associates. And so one of the things I put together was kind of a list of types of work cultures. And I'm going to start with the big guys. So number one, we have people like Amazon. The biggest, the boldest, the monopolies, if they can get into it. They are a bellwether for a lot of things. We compare ourselves to Amazon all the time. And we probably shouldn't, because we aren't Amazon. We're not trying to be Amazon. Yet they are so big, so public, and pushing so many envelopes that we do it anyway. We still compare ourselves to them. And so one of the articles I shared, Luke, from the New York Times, is basically an editorial with lots of different people's input as to what it's like to work at Amazon. And my summary of Amazon, and it may be oversimplified, is they are a churn and burn, purposeful, weed out the weak company. They take the too much to do, not enough time to the absolute extreme. And in that article, you can read a lot of exact and specific examples of this. But one of the things the company itself has admitted to is purposeful Darwinism, is what they call it. So survival of the fittest. If you aren't good enough, you're not delivering the right results, whatever the case may be, you're out. Whether it be on your own, or you're told that you're just not performing and you get let go. There's a lot of examples of this being a very maximum hours job, 80 hours a week, working on weekends, working on vacations, on holidays. And if you don't, you tend to get asked why you're suffering. Well, your performance isn't keeping up. Things like that. So it's a very, very tough place. The pros of the job would be it is very competitive on the pay side. So they do pay very well. They offer stock options for a stock that I don't think has stopped going up. You will make good money there. And so, Luke, I don't think that ties into education at all, but there's got to be some things here that you kind of fit yourself into. And I'm not even done talking about Amazon. But at a high level, do you see schools going for a churn and burn, get people out of there if they're no good, or a little more lax?
I think with anything, I think the thing that comes to my mind is teacher burnout, and teacher burnout is a very real thing, where teachers, will teachers will work so hard in these early couple years, and they will burn out very quickly and kind of phase out of the education system by a few years in. I think, again, just because of that high stakes that many of them are under, that pressure that many of them are under, it's a very difficult thing in teaching, I'm not going to lie. And I think that, but I also think that it's a very rewarding thing. I think it's something that you have to kind of balance, and that's where I think it's a little bit different than almost any example you're going to give. But I also think that's just because it's also the public sector, and the public sector is a little different too. But I think it's interesting. I think the way I can connect that to Amazon, that survival of the fittest, maybe. I wouldn't say necessarily survival of the fittest for education, but I would say teachers will burn out. And so I think a really big thing for educators is to continue to get support from their teachers, their cohorts, their administrations. I think that's really important, and I think that's what has kept me being successful in my role as a teacher. But yeah, you want to jump back to Amazon, please do.
Yeah, so some of the props I got to give to Amazon is that they own who they are. They know who they are. They are okay with who they are. And if you don't like it, you don't have to work there. And they're fine with it. But there are a lot of people who thrive in that environment, and so that's who they welcome. So here's some of the principles that Amazon has set in place. There's 14 of them. You can check it out right on their website, amazon.jobs. But some of the the ones I highlighted are: number one, customer obsession. That's their exact words for it. Everything that you do, everything you work on, everything you talk about, everything has to come for the customer. How can you benefit the customer? Can you get something to them in an hour instead of 24 hours? Can you offer it at a lower price? Whatever the case may be, the customer has to be first. Another one of their principles is just a general bias for action, which essentially means, we don't care if you are sitting in your office and just tracking numbers. We want you to do things. We want you to stop what you're doing if you need to and complete this urgent project, task, issue that just came up. How do you get something off your plate? So they really like type D people. The type D people on a disc scale are the people who just get it done. Sometimes they are bullheaded, just go, get it done. That's something they want. And if you fail, great. We'll just try something different. Frugality. So they are a very frugal company. If they're going to do all these things, they can't just go and spend every dollar that they have. So one of the reasons I threw this in here, and the New York Times article talks about, some people have used their own cash out of their own pockets to pay for their own travel, even if it's for work. They have used their own money to pay other people to help them do some of the more menial tasks in their job. So the company is so frugal that some people are choosing to spend their own money on resources that most companies would provide for you. One of the last big points I wanted to bring up is towards the bottom of their principles, but definitely still a very clear, important one, is have a backbone, disagree, and commit. So you'll see in the New York Times article that associates are encouraged to, quote, tear into other people's ideas. Tear them up. And it's not personal. It is always with that customer first. If we don't tear your idea apart, it may be a little less perfect, and the customer will suffer. And so that's a hard thing to do. So, Luke, that's someone coming to you, watching you teach a class. Once all the kids leave, they say, hey, let's talk about that. And they just destroy and ridicule everything you did with a genuine interest in the students. Sure. Doesn't have anything to do with you. It's for the best interest of the students. I'm going to tell you everything you did wrong. Is that something you think you would be welcome to, or would that throw you off guard?
I think that would be difficult. I think that ties into a bigger management strategy of just, for me, it's always positive reinforcement. It's, okay, let's look at this, let's look at this area where we can improve, and then let's focus on how we can continue to improve that, rather than berating someone. If that's what I think you're referring to, is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think berate is a little strong.
Okay.
It's just very direct and very honest.
Sure.
And it's not personal.
Yeah, that would be a very difficult thing to handle. I think that the impersonality of that would be a little bit difficult. I think I respond better. This is just me as a human. This is me as a person. I think I respond better when I get critiqued in a manner where, I can feel like I can learn and grow from those mistakes, which is kind of contrary to what I think you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing that you are at least aware of. So, like I said, Amazon owns who they are. They don't go and respond to articles like this and tell you they're wrong. They are what they are. And so if that's something that you're not comfortable with, and frankly, I'm not either, just from a personality perspective, from an emotional perspective, it's not something I'm interested in. I want it to be a more collaborative, supportive environment, not necessarily it's about something else, you're just a pawn in this game type of situation. So one of the next companies I'll go to is another huge company. So we've talked about one huge company and how they handle things.
Mm-hmm.
Another huge company, and there's several that fit into this category, is Google or Apple or Oracle. All these big tech companies, and they don't have to be tech companies, but really, really big companies who have to fight for talent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people that have a lot of specific talents, and that means there's a reason to covet you. You are needed. And so these companies can all pay you very, very well. But if they can all pay you very well, they have to sway you one way or the other with other things. So Google, instead of telling you to go argue with people and be frugal and all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they give you free meals, 3 a day if you want. You can
Mm-hmm.
eat all of the food you want for free.
Mm-hmm.
You're well compensated. They bring in speakers that are interesting to you. And so one of the examples I found was that they had Ryan Reynolds come in to discuss Deadpool when it was about to come out.
It's pretty cool.
It may not have anything to do with your job, but it keeps you happy. It's something interesting to you. They offer it.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously have a gym, which is a little more common of an amenity that a company may have nowadays.
Sure.
They certainly have a lot of gyms. They offer massages. Again, totally free. If you want to take advantage of it, go for it. And they actually encourage you to spend some time away from work. They want you to have work-life balance. And they encourage you to, quote, go do good things. So go make memories with your children. Go volunteer some of your time with a charity. Go do the things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so they know that there's a lot of work to get done. But having all of the things that support your life, your lifestyle, your family, it actually makes you more motivated to work a little harder. And so they don't have to force you to get everything done and churn and burn, survival of the fittest. It doesn't have to be that ruthless. They provide you with the things that make you happy. In return, you work very hard and do your very best for the company that's providing that to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Luke, do you have an arcade at school like Google would?
I don't have an arcade at school like Google would. That would be interesting. A little bit different, I think. I think that's where we dive into the difference between the public sector and private sector. But yeah, I mean, Look, real talk from me as just me taking myself out of my role as a teacher. If I was in that kind of situation at Google, I would be all about that. Like, that would incentivize me. I would be very motivated to work there. That sounds really cool. And so, like you said, talent and results are rewarded. It's competitive, but you're also being encouraged by these things that are happening by management or upper management that are incentivizing you to do better. You want to do better because you're enjoying these things at work. And I mean, the simple fact is, I think, if you're more happy doing something, you're going to do it better, right? I mean, if I was going to sit here and like dread this podcast, I would do a terrible podcast. Or if I didn't want to do it, it would be terrible, right? As opposed to being energetic and excited about it. So I think those incentives all obviously make it more likely for the employees to, want to do well for that company, right?
Yeah, one of the things we say at work is, if the company takes care of you, you will take care of the company.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Sure.
One of the other things we say at work that kind of goes more towards the Amazon ideal is that people don't come to work to F off, right? People don't come to work with the intention of doing something wrong, with making your job harder.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that idea in mind, you can have reasonable, collaborative, friendly conversations about the projects that need completed, the tasks that need completed, instead of just pointing out all the flaws.
Mm-hmm.
So now we move on to, we've talked about some big companies.
Yeah.
And there are big companies that don't fit into either of those, but we're going to move into kind of the average small to medium company. So basically where the vast majority of the U.S. population works is these established companies, maybe rapidly growing companies, but they're just average, small to medium, maybe 1,000 employees across the country. But they get caught in the middle just because by their size. they compare themselves to Amazon or Google and how can we be more like them, which, like as I said earlier, you don't necessarily want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you compare yourself to someone that you're not and you are never going to be,
Mm-hmm.
then you are always setting yourself up for failure. But
Mm-hmm.
these companies get stuck in that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They operate very differently. And so what I see happening a lot of times is these companies have very customized and unique ways of handling their culture at work.
Mm-hmm.
So they are the companies that will offer a little bit of paternity leave if that seems to be important to their associates. They'll offer maybe, we put in a gym at our company a few years ago. That
Cool.
seemed to be important, and frankly, it can
Mm-hmm.
help you with the cost of health care and health insurance.
Sure.
So there's actually financial benefits to it at times.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a gym. We have talked about an in-house daycare just to make life a little easier for anyone who works there. So you don't have to worry about that. Maybe it's a nominal fee
Mm-hmm.
just to cover the cost. Maybe it's free. And so these are all the things that, these companies tend to have either something that you like or something that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But no matter what, it brings up the point that, you need to know what you want and you need to be asking questions in your interviews, researching online,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be, to try to figure out what is the corporate culture at this company.
Mm-hmm.
How do they value you, your time, your effort, and what are they trying to do to retain you besides giving you a paycheck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, again, tying that into the broader scheme, I think I'm tying it into bigger picture because, again, I feel like a lot of this maybe differently applicable, but not as applicable to my own the
Yep.
hat that I wear. But tying this into the broader scheme of just social acceptance, I feel like, again, what you're saying is very, very indicative of what we as humans desire, right? Do we sometimes desire to be challenged? Yes. Do we sometimes desire, do we often desire, we always desire to feel valued, right? We want to feel valued, we want to feel needed, and we want those needs to be met. So it's this balance of, I don't want this cutthroat competitiveness. I don't want this fear, this culture of, if I mess up, something bad's going to happen to me. I also don't want this lax culture of, if I don't do anything, then what does it matter, right? I mean, that ties into the bigger scheme of why would I work harder than that guy? We're both, not getting anything out of it. So it's difficult. So would you say, I guess my question is there, it seems like we've got these two big ends. We've got these two comparisons, these two sides. This average small medium company, this is kind of the one that's in the middle. Would you say this is what the majority of people are dealing with, or what are, I'm just a little, because I struggle to think that every company would be like Amazon or every company would be like Google. And then I feel like most would fall into this bubble of we're just trying to work with the means we have. We're trying to get our employees what they want. We're also trying to balance that with, and maybe this is something because you've never even said this word this entire podcast, but productivity. And I think, obviously a happy worker is going to be a more productive worker, right? The more happy your employees are, the more they're going to want to work there. But how do you balance that? Do you think there's a good answer to that, or am I maybe off in left field on this?
I don't think there's a single good answer.
Yeah.
So there's too many different types of companies that fit into this category.
Mm-hmm.
So the company I work for is in apparel, retail sales, but only online or through catalogs.
Mm-hmm.
You also have companies like maybe there's a Salesforce
Mm-hmm.
is a growing. It's probably a bigger company now, more like a Google. But for a while, it was a decent-sized tech company.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have the means to have these elaborate campuses like Google does.
Sure.
They didn't maybe have the financial means if they were still growing, doing a lot of investing. So there's a reality at this level
Mm-hmm.
that you only have so much cash in the bank account. So
Right.
you can only do so much technically.
Right.
The other thing is you have to identify what are the one or two, maybe three things that will benefit your people the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have a wide range of age, of ethnicity, of skill, of wishes and technical skills. We have a very, very diverse workforce where I'm at, which is a great quality, a great thing to be able to say.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, from a cultural perspective, it makes it very hard to identify the one or two things that everyone can benefit from.
Mm.
There are some people who've been there for 30 years who are more interested in getting their paycheck, putting their head down and getting their job done and going home.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who are fresh out of college and say, wait, my buddy is making more money than me. I get it. He lives in Chicago, so it's a different cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has, they have beanbag chairs and an Xbox in their break room. Or they have free snacks in the refrigerator, whatever the case may be. And so you have to figure out somehow to meet in the middle on that. And it's very, very challenging. And so you see, especially in like my field, a lot of people rotating around through companies and through jobs to see what they want. And so sometimes as a company, you just have this responsibility to make it very well known what it's like to work at your company. There's no value in hiring somebody for them to turn around and become disappointed because you guys didn't communicate well in the interview process as to what it's like to work there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, it's hard. So there's a lot of challenges at that level. But let's move on to maybe the average startup.
Mm-hmm.
So we've basically covered all facets of business now. And so if you have the average startup, that is the opposite of probably the Amazon, Google, where it's a very well-established, very well-defined culture. So an average startup, you tend to have less people.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to have very self-motivated people, very entrepreneurial people. And it really comes down to the job just has to get done. Someone who has the skill to do it's going to have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So titles and pay and all of that's a lot less relevant. You just, in short terms, you just do what you got to do to make the business successful, to match up to the needs of a customer that you've identified. And, that also, you kind of look around and it's a lot of fun because you're busy, you're making an impact. The business is changing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
It's an exciting time to be around there, but maybe you don't get to be as home as often. You got to be okay with that.
Right.
Maybe there's not a lot of financial rewards right now because, frankly, we don't make a lot of money yet. We think we're going to, but we don't yet. So you got to be patient, but yet very motivated. So it's another challenging and interesting situation. But the people who get into that volunteer for that. So they know what they're getting into. So that's why you see these big companies and these little startup companies do well to retain people because everyone's on the same page as to what it's like to work there, what it means to work there, and what you are going to experience on an average day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Luke, that would be why you stay at your school. You have a clear expectation for what your work day is like, what your principal will do for you, what he won't, what other teachers will do for you, what they won't, what you have to find for yourself, what will be given to you. All of that's very clear, and as long as you're okay with it all, you don't have a lot of reason to ever leave.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that ties into the bigger picture of what you're talking about with work culture in general. Yeah, definitely.
Some of the other things that I wanted to kind of bring up in this podcast was we're talking about the culture surrounding work, not necessarily, we've talked a lot about what individual companies in this country may experience, but there are a lot of differences too in how a society thinks about culture at work. Mm-hmm. So for example, there are less developed countries in this world that are known for having, quote unquote, sweatshops or just hard manual labor, very poor working conditions, poor pay conditions, a total lack of care that you have a family, that you want a family, maybe that you even have food on your table. So that's obviously the worst extreme. You also have in some other very developed countries, similar to ours, you have countries like South Korea, who's a pretty tech heavy country nowadays. Um, but they have enforced maximum weekly work hours.
Mm-hmm.
So here soon, the maximum amount of time you're going to be able to work in your job is 40 hours a week. Period. That is a law.
Hmm.
And so they are saying it'll be there tomorrow. You got to spend some time at home. You got to see your kids. You got to connect with these charities. Do whatever you want to do in your free time, but you have to take advantage of what free time you have.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other countries like Europe, countries in Europe where, we have all known or heard about their extended summer vacations, even on a corporate level. Maybe 80% of the workforce doesn't work for the whole month of August.
Mm-hmm.
So someone might still have to be in there to answer a U.S. phone call or two. But for the most part, it's, summer off for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We have more examples of paid maternity and paternity leave. There's just a different value in that society for family and for being with your family and being an active member as a parent. So that's just one of the main points. And then you have countries that are somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
For example, China. They're a relatively developed country, yet they're still kind of known for having those poor, cheap labor working conditions. But every year in February, they have their Chinese New Year, and the whole country shuts down, and it's a big party for a week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is crazy on my side of the business because we buy a lot of stuff from China.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this mad rush right before Chinese New Year every single year to ship as much as you can out of the country because it's going to be at least another week or two before you get another chance.
Right.
And the whole world accepts it because they are so adamant that this period of time throughout the year is that important to every single person in that country.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kind of things that I wish we recognize here in our own country is what as a society do we value?
Mm.
And at some point did we value being a part of the family and with your family differently than we do today?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have these prescribed gender roles where a man needs to be out doing the job and a woman needs to be at home?
Mm.
In some areas of the country we might. In some companies we still might.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have different ideas around what it means to be young in your career? Maybe as a millennial, someone who's been in their career for a year or two, you're expected to put in 80 hours because you got to pay your dues, right? Mm-hmm. But when you get a little older, 40, 50, 60, close to retirement, kick up your feet and play solitaire. What, as a society and as a country, do we value? And we need to be translating that into what we ask for in our workplaces. And Luke, I think that even applies in a school. There's no reason that as a group of teachers, you can't kind of make sure you're on the same page and say, hey, Mr. Principal, Mr. Superintendent, or Mrs. Again, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you may be playing into those gender roles there, maybe.
Maybe. But, whoever it might be, you just say, look, this is something that's important to us. Let's talk about how we get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, like you said, I think kind of what you're saying is this is, for leadership at the top, that's what's really important and how they look at this. And I think if leadership's willing to listen and work with you, I think anytime any body has a positive relationship. I'll go back to my time at, when I worked at Hardee's in Danville. I knew that, if there was an issue, I could go to my boss and say, hey, I need to take this day off. Is that going to be okay? And I wasn't necessarily afraid to approach my boss. I wasn't afraid to ask for that day off or that time off if I needed to. I was in high school. If I needed to study for a test or something, or if I had a meet for cross country or something. I think that is a very, very big deal. And I think you're right. Your last line here, culture and leadership drive loyalty and departures. You're absolutely right. It's just like again, I'm tying it into broader context because I can see the parallels to what I do, but it's a little different. But your point there is well taken. But even in society, even in a group of people, if you are accepted into the group, I play basketball with a group of guys on Tuesdays and Fridays, and they always accept, hey, you want to jump in? You want to come on it? Awesome. But if they excluded me, if they, oh, this dude's not very good, he can sit out, whatever, that would make a very big difference on my outlook. I would be less likely to come back if I didn't feel valued, if I got picked last every time, going to that analogy of sports, But, that is a very good point. And the value that you feel from your employer is very, very, very important. And I think, like you said, all these things tie in and make the people who actually, the workers, the labor, they're more motivated. They get the job done better. And I think, like you said, though, I think with all things, it's a balance. It's very difficult to, I'm not even going to pretend like I understand how that works, but I would imagine it'd be very difficult to balance productivity and worker satisfaction with what our end goal is. I mean, I think we've discussed in this podcast, the bottom line of a business is to make money. So how do you balance that? And I think the points you brought up are really good and showing different ways that different companies have approached that. And it's a very, very interesting thing to consider. But I think in general, I mean, the more valued you feel as an individual in your group, the more you're going to contribute to that group, the more successful your group is going to be, whatever you're doing, be that, playing basketball on the court or, getting orders in and out from China in a quick, effective manner and making sure your company is profitable.
Yeah, I think the one last plea I'll make to anyone listening is if there's something about the culture and the company in which you work, and it is a problem that is large enough for you to consider leaving, there is no reason for you to not raise your hand to your leader, to your boss, to anyone who might listen, to say, this is something that upsets me, this is something I don't like, I'd love to talk about how we might solve it if we are willing to solve it. In that situation, there's no lose for you, right? If you're already unhappy, you're considering leaving, there's no reason to not go ahead and fight to see if you can solve your problem.
Right.
And you are probably not the only person with that problem. That's the primary reason I want to make this plea. If you are unhappy about something, there's a really good chance someone else is also unhappy about something. So not only might you solve a problem for yourself, you may solve a problem for a lot of people. And if nothing changes and you end up leaving, then at the very least, the person you talk to knows full well why you left. And if they want to avoid other people leaving for that same reason, maybe your departure is the one kicking the butt someone finally needs. But, we should avoid getting to that point at all, if at all possible. Talk to your leaders, talk to your boss, talk to anyone who is in a position to help make change. Just to tell them, here's something that I don't love. And I'm not going to leave tomorrow, but I'd certainly love to maybe work on solving this issue. I want to be able to leave by 5 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock. How can we make that happen? Right. Little things like that can go a long way.
Right, and I think the biggest point there, too, that you're bringing up is to offer to be a part of that solution. Rather than just sitting back and, oh, this is the way it is, and, oh, woe is me, to not just raise your hand, but say, what can I do to help facilitate this process? That is something,
Even better, propose a solution.
Yes.
Say, hey, here's a problem I have. Here's how I think we can solve it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just, at the end of the day, as humans, we're all working together in a common goal. We're all struggling, like you said, with this balance. Family life, work life, social life, personal life. We're all balancing this, and we did the podcast on that, talking about that work-life balance. And that's a difficult thing, but to offer to be a part of the solution, to even extend and to offer a solution That's a very powerful thing that I think you can do there, Pat, and I think you're completely right. So any final thoughts on that, Pat, before we wrap this up?
I'm good, man. I think I've made my peace, and I could talk about this all day.
No, I think this was a great conversation. You brought up some really interesting things that I had not considered. Again, my background not necessarily in that, but it's very interesting to hear from that perspective and to share those ideas with you. And again, to kind of parallel some own things, even just in my own personal life, to kind of this balance that we're talking about in many ways. So before we wrap up, just want to let everybody know that our next topic for next week is still up in the air. It's still up for consideration. We know news breaks really quickly, and so we are also going to look to you for suggestions. So if you, when you listen to this podcast, if you want to leave a suggestion in the comments for maybe something you would like us to discuss, we've talked about all kinds of things. We've talked about video games. We've talked about professional sports, and now we've talked about professional work life. So with this being a variety of podcasts, we're trying to hit on as many things as possible, and we want to keep what interests our listeners. So if you have something interesting, please leave a comment, and we'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, Pat, I think that wraps up this episode. Any closing things you want to tell everybody? Thanks for listening, I guess, from me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for listening. Please let us know what you think, and if there's certainly topics you'd love us to discuss, don't forget to find us on Facebook, PNLIRL, or on Twitter, PLIRL1. Just reach out to us in any way you can. This will be, as always, in a variety of formats on YouTube, Podbean, Buzzsprout, wherever you are listening. We're going to try to have this show available to you.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we will talk to you next time. See you then.